Okay, hello everybody. Again for another exciting webinar. As Anna said, today I will show you how can you bring your Shaper design and turn it into beautiful digital renderings. So let's start with Shaper first. As you can see, I have my object here designed. I gave everything different colors. And let me open the bodies. There you can see I have multiple groups. For example, in this group, I have my two lenses. Here I have a group for the frame, the outside, the frame, the inside, hinges. For example, there are the hinges or the socket, hinge left and hinge right. So you might ask yourself, well, why did he sort everything into this way? Well, the nice thing is when we go to export, go save as, and use the OBJ. Maybe at this point, let's make a quick pause. OBJ, STL, which one should I use? Technically speaking, it doesn't really matter. STL, however, is very good if you just want to 3D print. And OBJ is good when you want to do renderings, simply because the materials we can apply in Shaper will be carried over. So we'll go to OBJ. We can give this a name. And here is a check mark. So save each group into a separate file. When you do this, you don't just get one OBJ file with all the meshes inside. You will get for each group an individual file, which is actually very, very useful when later you want to re-export changed parts in Shaper. So here we could give this a name, go continue. Then Shaper right now will create the polygon mesh. And based on how complex your design is, it might take a second. So we see this zip file will be 3.4 megabyte, and then you can just save it on iCloud or email to you. I saved this in iCloud and I transferred it over already to my desktop. Here you can see the zip file, and when I opened it, there are the different OBJs. As you can see also here, well, this is blue, this is gray. Here we have multiple colors because there are 3 different objects. So you see the materials actually come over. And all these objects I will bring step by step over. So let me give you a quick overview of what we will hopefully end up with. Let me open the final design. So this is essentially kind of like what we will have when we bring in all the individual parts. Then we will create materials, we will add lights, add cameras, and add some special effects. For example, like depth of field so that the front is sharp and the back is slightly blurry. Okay, enough said. Let's get working. Fortunately, this will be a recording, so don't freak out. There will be a lot of parts we have to do to set up. But once you do this 1 or 2 times, it becomes pretty second nature. Okay, so let's start Blender. I will try to only cover the most important elements. So first thing, for example, we go here to the right side. Here we have a lot of the settings we will use for the rendering, for the image, and the scene, the world. For example, here for the scene, we can go to units and make sure this runs actually in metric. Very good. Up here, scene collections. This will be later where we'll have all the different mesh imports, and this is our 3D view. Up here, we have the main menu and some tools. So let's go to File, because we have to import now the OBJ files. Import OBJ. I will go to where my folder is. And these are the individual files. So for example, the frame inside color. Then I go down lower left and set the forward to Y and Z up. This is actually really important to know. This is a common struggle everybody might encounter when moving one mesh model to a different program, that sometimes the up direction is flipped. Some programs use Y and some programs use Z. Shaper uses Z, so I set Blender up that is also Z. Very good. We can just click this, go import, and then with the mouse wheel, we can zoom in a little bit. With the middle mouse button, we can rotate. Shift and middle mouse button, we can move around. Okay. So this is our first imported object. With the left mouse button, I can select it. Then I go to the right side. This ball, this is for materials. I can click. The name is default OBJ. Here, I call this maybe inside plastic. I would like this to be blue, so I can click on this base color, make this blue. I want this to be plastic, so specular, that means the reflection. I can click and slide, set this to 1. This should be nice and polished. So the roughness, I can click and slide to the left. Otherwise, I could also click and then press 0 and enter. Very good. Let's bring in the next part. Import, wavefront OBJ. This time we use the outside. These settings will remain, so we don't have to set these up again. Okay, there we are. There you can see this is not the correct material. So I needed to click the newly imported object. You see the first object was selected. So I click the next one. Here I can say plastic outside. Maybe this should be a dark. I click and slide. There, very good. Let's do the next. So wavefront OBJ. Here we have the hinge frame. Click import. So there we have these sockets. So with the mouse wheel, when I zoom in too much, you see there is some sort of clipping happening. So let's fix this. With the mouse, I go to right there. We have the small icon. We can click, and then we see view. We can click on this, and the clip start. This basically means when the clipping of the camera starts and ends. So let's say you have a scene that is 10 meters deep. We could set this up so we only see a distance of 2 meters, for example. And this is nothing I want. So I put this into 1 millimeter. Enter. Very good. Now I can zoom in a lot further. Very good. So let's click this again. You see now this is yellow. This means it's really active. So this is metal. Let's say we call this one then chrome, or we could call this steel. So this is metal. Metallic reflections are different. So specular I set to 0, and I set metallic up. And let's keep roughness down. For all the settings here right now, because we only have a short amount of time and this is a basic introduction, I really go through the basic elements. If at one point you guys have more questions, feel free to contact us or me, or also go to the Blender website. But I hope that with this introduction, I will show you this is actually a pretty easy process. So now we will bring in the hinge on the left side there. So I click it. I make this one Chrome 2. or steel. Instead of modifying or making a new material, I click on this ball here. You see there's a list now of the materials I created, and select steel. Very good. Import. And the other one there, and steel. Very good. Okay. Now we need to bring in a few more objects. So for example, the socket. Let's click this one, the socket. We can call this one socket, for example. It could maybe later be a silicone material or something that jams in. Okay, for the moment we keep this. And the last element, the lenses there. Okay, very good. So for the lenses, I set specular down, roughness down, and then I scroll down. And transmission, that basically means the transparency. So with one, this is working now like glass. We could call this one lens if we want to. Very good. So most of this is now set up. And before we continue, here's one little element I would like to point out. So I click on this X, then I press Alt B. You can see I can draw a selection and draw a selection like this, zoom in, and I rotate a little bit and zoom in more. And you see there is a tiny gap between the lens and the frame. And I did this on purpose because in real life, objects are next to each other. But as you can see in here, in CAD, objects are never next to each other. They're perfectly intersecting each other, just one surface and the other surface. And in the rendering of the frame, that doesn't really show up. But with the glass, when looking through the lens, we would be able to see how this lower part of the lens would intersect with the frame material, which is why in Shaper, I made the lens just a tiny bit smaller. Enough so you don't see it, and enough also I don't get that render height effect. Very good. So how do we continue? To do a rendering, we need a camera, we need lights, and we also need a ground plane. So let's add a ground plane. We go to Add, Mesh, and Plane, and there we are. Very good. So if we click here on this green one, in my case, we can see that my frame is floating. And what I simply will do is I will click the move command there. Then I can move this one up to there. And then with the red arrow, I move it down to there so that this orange dot that's the center is right under the frame. When I zoom to here now, I can see that my temple is a little bit off. So to fix this, I can press R. And you see I'm in a side view. So R, and then I rotate this along the y-axis. If we are a little bit like in the 3D view, when I press R, you see the rotation happens along the view. So I can press Y to restrict the rotation only along the y-axis. But this is sometimes a little bit more confusing or complicated to do, which is why very often when I do these manipulations, I always switch to the individual views. And then I can just press R till there, it fits. Very good. Okay, nice. So let's add a camera. So I go Add, Camera. I don't see the camera, and it's somewhere there. So let's go to the wireframe mode. There's my camera. You can see the camera is under my object. First, I would like this camera to scale down a little bit. So we could use the scale tool. So I click and drag, or easier for scale, the hotkey is S. So you press S, move your mouse to the center. You see then it gets closer. When I move it away, it gets bigger. And this camera has a bad position and a crazy rotation. So on the right side, when you go to items, see transform, and there it tells me this camera is rotated by these degrees. So I can click and press 0, click, press 0, click, press 0, and everything is fixed. Very nice. So also here I can click and drag. So I know my camera, I can rotate here by 90. Then this is actually Y. No, actually, in this case, because I rotated the object, I have to use X. So I can rotate this there. And let's move this away. So I go to the move to command there, move it up, bring it to there. Very good. So the camera is a little bit further away. Before we continue, we need a light. So let's add a light. Add light, and we will use the area light. And then we simply move this one up. Let's go to the light. Here we say this should be 20 centimeters. Could also type in 10 inches. You see, this is very flexible. Doesn't really matter what unit system you're in, as long as you can work with units. The software converts everything for you. Very good. We can keep the light there for the moment. And this is a very big view. So I will go with my mouse down to this border. So this is a 3D view. This is the animation view. And once my mouse always goes to these borders, you see how it changes the icon. And now I can click and drag this one up. The next thing is a little bit hit and miss. You see these corners have the ability to turn the mouse into this cross. And what that means is, if I now click and slide to the left, I can add another view. Now with this camera selected, I can go to camera. Ta-da! And middle mouse button, click and drag. We set this to shaded. Here, shaded. So here now I can see my scene. I can scroll around, and here I see the rendering. This is actually very useful. Okay, very good. Let's press N. With N, you can show and hide the property. With T, you can show and hide the toolbar. And we're actually getting ready to do our first rendering. Before we continue, let's go to the camera. So Blender has multiple render engines, and we want to switch Eevee to cycles. Very good. I have CUDA installed, and I have two graphics cards, so I will use my CUDA and the GTX 1070. I also have a 12-core or two 6-core CPUs, but rendering with the graphic cards is insanely faster. So I set this to GPU here. And this only works when you are on NVIDIA and you have CUDA. If you're with AMD, you don't have this. Then let's select the light, rotate the view a little bit. We can go to here and then click on this icon, rendered. And here we see our scene. So here we can rotate, it switches out of the camera. We can go back to the camera view by clicking this. So this scene is really, really bright. The composition is also not nice. So we'll click the camera. Then I move my camera a little bit to there. And I can use the rotate command and rotate it along this z-axis. There, now I see my frame a little bit more. And again, everything I do via move and rotate, you will also see here adjusted. So you can use the widget, or you can use the numeric input. So maybe we have to move this a little bit higher. The angle is not very good there. And now I would like this to rotate down a little bit and a little bit further up. So we frame our object nicely. So why is it so bright? And that's pretty much because we click the light and then go to the light properties. Then we click use nodes. It has a strength of 100. This is really high. Type in 1 and it's much softer. Type in 0 and it basically there is no light coming from the source, but there's still a little bit of light going on. And that is because when we go to the world icon, we have a world right now emitting light too. If I set the strength to 0, this is now pitch black. When I go back to the light and say 1, there, nice in contrast. Very good. Okay, so currently we have just a light coming from the top. Before we continue, and if you're new to rendering, what is really useful to understand what to do is simply go online. And I will do this maybe for a moment. Okay, and type in product photography. And let's go to images and yeah, something like here. There you can see how they're setting everything up, where the camera is, where the lights are, how the environment is built, or for example here with area lights and something like a backdrop, how they're shooting the light also onto the backdrop. So these are really great references to understand maybe how to set up an environment. Because essentially what we do in digital rendering is nothing else and just rebuilding something like this, just digitally. This is really all that's to it. That is what makes rendering so easy. Once you understand working with lights and designing a scene, then it's only a matter of practice getting good at it. So right now we have a light coming from top. The shadows are right below. That's kind of boring. So what I will do is this light, I will switch my transform orientation to local. And you will see just in a second what this means. I go to rotate. Then I rotate this one along the y-axis there. And then I will rotate this along the x-axis. You see that the widget actually rotates with the object. And then along the x-axis here, I move it down and then bring it back. Now you see we have a lot more light contrast right on front. If you move the light a little bit to there, and maybe rotate this a little bit more, and then we bring this to there, we get more light on the left side, and the shadows are being longer. This makes this area a little bit dark. So what we could do, I click on the Z, so I'm a top view. Shift D makes a copy. Shift D, I move it to there. I could click and drag through these 3 fields, type in 0. And you see that? So then 90 degrees, and then 180 degrees. Nope, that was oh, sorry, this one, 180 for the Z. Very good. So I made a copy of the same light, and I just basically flood the scene now with light come from that part. So the left side gets light, the right side, this corner gets less light. And I can be creative now, maybe a little bit less. What about more light? Maybe this light, I want to be very strong. 5, and this is too strong, but 2, that's a good contrast. Okay, very good. So 1, 2, 3 lights is really all you need. Maybe we will add 1 light on top. So I can select this light, make a copy via Shift D, move this to somewhere, and then I say this is 0, this is 0. I go to a side view. Then I can move this to here and there, and I'm just moving this around, trying to see what type of highlight do I get on top of this frame. When you work with lights, here's another interesting trick. When you select these lights, you see them here being highlighted. So I can turn off the eyes here. So that means then that they're currently not being used for rendering. Now I only have 1 light, and when I move this around, I can then better study how this creates, for example, highlights. Now I have a really nice highlight there, and then I can bring in the previous lights. Very good. So you see how this is kind of dull, and with this light, there we have something for the eyes. Same on the other part. My lenses are actually not transparent. I think I made a mistake at the beginning. Let's see. We switched the render engine, so and no, actually the material got lost. Lens there. Very good. So now it's transparent. I did not actually associate the material to the lens. Talking about lenses, we can actually tint those. So with the transmission, obviously we make this more opaque, more transparent. And then when we click the base color, you get this color wheel. And this point you can click and drag, and we can tint our lenses. Pretty nice. Maybe like this. There. Very good. Okay. So when we select the ground, I zoom out a little bit. So this ground plane, you want to be as big as possible. So this is obviously too small. So nice and big. So it's always framed or filling the camera. The ground plane can be white, can be reflective, can be black, can be diffuse. So let's play a little bit with how we can work with the ground. So click New. Now we set roughness to 0. We go with specularity up. And there we see now, if we zoom in a little bit, there's a reflection from the frame nicely. Unfortunately, there's also no reflection actually from my top light too. So I might have to move this around a little bit so it is away. Okay, there, very good. Let's click the ground plane again. With roughness, we can increase a little bit the blurriness, 0.1, 0.2. But now if we set this base color to black, it gets really nice. Because a reflection on a white surface, that's kind of difficult to see. So here again, if we play very gentle with the roughness, we can make the reflection very blurry, so it's suggestive. And it's up to your taste, how you want to work with it. I will keep it at 0.1. Very nice. Maybe my camera is a little bit too high, because in terms of composition, this looks a little bit awkward. So I will click my camera, move this one down a little bit. See, now I can see more of it, but now I also have to rotate my camera. So along the x-axis, move this one up there. Okay, and maybe a little bit left or right. There, this looks better. And now I need to rotate it. Very good. Okay, see, this light already comes in a little bit on the ground reflection, so I move this light a little bit further away. Cool. Okay, nice. In my test render, I had also an depth of field effect. Let me show you how that works. So when I click on the camera, and then I go to viewport display, and I go compositional guides. You see here let's go this way so you can see them. We have compositional guides like thirds, etc. So this is just like a guide for you. But under viewport display, we also have limits. When we turn limits on, you see there's a yellow plus. And when I go and scroll down to the depth of field and then go to distance and slide this, you can see that I can bring this plus to where my object is. And let's say I position this right there. Okay, so everything, think about this plus as a plane. Everything on this plane can be sharp. And the rest will to the front and to the back blurry. So let's check this out. Nothing changed. Well, because we specified the focus of my lens, but we didn't really specify the amount of blurriness or the aperture. So here we have radius and f-stop. I found working with the radius very easy because now I can just type in 1 and it's super blurry. Well, it's just 1 meter. What about 1 millimeter? It's already doing a little bit there. You see that? Very gentle. If we set this to 0, that's nice and sharp. 1 centimeter. See, that 1 centimeter is pretty strong. Yeah, way too strong. And again, here with the limits, if I now play with the distance, you can see how I can set a focus to parts of my object. So maybe 3 millimeters. What about that? Too strong. 2 millimeters. So you see these values I didn't find in a book. I simply try to pay attention to what happened into my rendering when I was adjusting these values. So I made like an artistic decision. From this camera angle, you see also here the reflection of my light. Maybe I will move this light forward. You see how I can play with the reflection, and maybe I will bring it more so it fills a little bit of the left lens. So it's less confusing. And we really know that there's actually a reflection and that it's not just a more opaque lens compared to the other lens. This whole scene is now a little bit dark. So let's go to the world, click and drag this one up to make this white, and then maybe 0.1. So we brighten this up a little bit, or 0.05, just a notch. And maybe this area here is still too dark. So I could go back to the top view, click this camera, press Shift D, then I can move this object. Then I can go to the rotate tool, rotate it, go to the move tool there. I want to just bring in a little bit more light, maybe 2. Yep, that's not too bad. Okay, very good. To do our first quick rendering, let's go to output. This is now the size. To explain the size, you see this is actually the size. We can see this visually. So if we say 1000 by 1000 pixels, it's a square image. 2000 by 1000. You see that's a rectangular image. So that's kind of like the way how we adjust the size. For just the image, we can render out 25%. We can render out 100. We can also make this double as big. So something like this is close to 8.5 by 11. And with 200, that would be an 8.5 by 11 rendering. So letter page or DNA4 with 300 dpi. This would be 100 dpi. You could go, if you need to make a rendering for a particular size, go to Photoshop, make an image to the size, and then take a look at the resolution and enter it in here. That's one of the easiest way to do. Output, here we have our RGB. That's all fine. Let's go back to here. So the rendering for this, we can set to 200. What does this sampling mean? Let me go back here for 1 second. So when I turn on the render, you see a small number creeping up. If I set this to 200, you see this goes higher and higher, higher. And when we pay attention to, you can see that the image gets cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. So that's basically how often does the software resample the scene, and each time it makes it less grainy. Sometimes you, like in interior renderings, you need 1,000 to 4,000 samples for rendering, which can be a lot, which is why we can go to View Layer and simply turn on this denoising. And I will show you just in a second what this denoising is. Before we continue, I will save this just as a test file. Save. Very good. Go to the shaded view and go render. So now there you see the image being rendered. And I will zoom in a little bit. You see how this is grainy? Just hold on a second. When the next part came rendered, and then you saw this got cleaned up. So from a distance, very often, this can help you do a nice trade-off between quality and speed. And when I zoom in here, you can see there are some artifacts because of the smoothing, but you might not necessarily see it. So the denoising is really a good helper to make renderings faster. This is also a common tool in literally all programs. I go back to render, view render. I will go to slot 2, and then I will do a rendering again so I can show you the difference. And just a second, there we are. So when I zoom in, there you can see how noisy this is. And with the denoiser, there, it looks pretty good. So this noise I could do better by, for example, typing in 400, let's say 600. But then again, now with the denoise, you can get a similar result, shorter time. Okay, so that was kind of like the basic introduction to the rendering. So kind of like we did a scene like this. Let's take a look at something like this or that, and also different cameras. So I will open this file again. There we are, very good. I click my camera, Shift D. I make a copy and move it to here. And, oh, this is the light. There's the camera. Shift D, then we will rotate this so it takes a look at maybe directly the front. I will turn on the wireframe mode so I see the grid. It's easier now to work with. And I want to see through this camera. So I can go to here, View, and then Cameras, and say, set active object as camera. So you see it switched to that camera. Very nice. And now if I would do a render, there you see my CPU is working hard because I quit the program. I need to reset this up. There we are. Very good. Render. Okay. Gaming graphic cards versus a 12-core Xeon render station. So you see, when you want to do different views, I don't move the camera because maybe later I want to go back and re-render a particular view. I just make a copy of my camera and then move it. So I could press J or go to slot 2, click this camera, go to view and set active camera there and render. And then I can show you how we can actually save these images. Very good. So to save, you simply go image, save as, and if you have multiple views or versions, like say different color variations, you just switch through the slot, and then each time you just click save. So for those who are interested in professional product photography, there's another thing I would like to show you. So this ground plane right now is in the material definition black and reflective. Okay, but what if I only want to have a drop shadow? So I make this kind of like not reflective. I could make this white again. Okay, so there's my white environment. This drop shadow I would like to see, but nothing else. So I could go to this icon. That's the object property. And go to cycles, which is the render engine, and I turn on the shadow catcher. That's a standard command, again, in digital rendering, which basically makes the object transparent, but you only will get the transparent shadow. This is pretty good. So with that done, now I also want my background to be transparent. There's one setting we have to set up. We go to render, go to film, and say the film now should be transparent. Good. Okay. So let's do a quick render of this image. And there you can see the checker box. That's basically telling you that the background is transparent. And then here you can see the shadow. So let's work this a little bit more till it's done. Okay, we're nearly done. Very good. So to show you the power of product rendering and visualization with Blender, we're going to add now a green material to the background, not inside Photoshop or a different program. We do this right here. So I will go to here and turn on the compositor there. Let's move this up a little bit, and then we say use nodes. We say backdrop. Very good, and we zoom in a little bit. Let's go to move this to there. Then add output a viewer. We move this to there, and then we can drag this one to there. Okay, so what we have now is the background image from the viewer. And for those who are not familiar with it, these are kind of like building blocks we do know. So compositor, that means later the image we save out, and viewer, that is kind of like what we see there right now. So I would like to have a green color. So add color and input RGB. There we are. And click and drag maybe this color. So how do I mix this in? This image, as you can see, has a transparent background. And here, alpha for transparency, that's the mask I could use for mixing. So I go to add, and for example, color alpha over. Drag this to here. Then this image I drag to there. This I drag to there. This I drag to there. And everything is green. This I drag to there. Why is this not mixing correctly? Because I have here a factor that says image 1 input is mixed now 50% with the second input, the green. But I want the transparency to be used to mix between the object and the color. So this alpha I drag into the factor. No, my my glasses is green. I want the opposite to happen. Well, I simply drag this to there. So I switch the order, and there we are. And look at this. Now I can just see my rendering with just different colors simply by sliding. And because this is all kind of like a real-time effect, if I now go to Window, Render, and say View Render, and for example, the View node, there we are, I could go View, Save As. And this is the way how I saved that image. So the reason why I showed you this, just so you understand, there is really a lot you can do with this program. There's obviously a learning curve to it, but you saw within 40 minutes, I was kind of like showing you how to work with lights, create the basic materials, and then do some renderings. Obviously, I do this since a very long time, so it's very easy for me. You might struggle a little bit more at the beginning, but it's not very complicated. And this program is super powerful, and it's actually what I do all my renderings of designs I do with Shaper with. And this kind of like brings everything to an end.